Welcome to the DNA Advantage podcast, where you can learn facts about your DNA that can help you live a healthier, longer life, doing all the activities you dream of doing. If you want to gain more control over your health and the factors that influence it, you're in the right place. Hi, I hope everyone's doing well today. One of the things that I have been talking to a few clients about lately is sleep. So I thought about highlighting some of the things that we can learn about ourselves when it comes to sleep and really understand how it relates to our health, and thought maybe it would be relevant and helpful to people at large. We all can appreciate what sleep does for us, especially when we don't get enough. The absence of sleep teaches us so many lessons. I don't think getting adequate sleep would ever teach us. Just even having a night or two in a row where we don't get enough sleep can cause so many issues. If we've felt the effects of that, it can include weakness and being unfocused or irritable and unmotivated, just grumpy overall. And it's not fun, but even more detrimental are the long-term effects if we don't recognize how important sleep is to our health. When we stop to think about how we're feeling and we can appreciate all of the factors that go into it, that's the complicated part of it, right? Because so many different things change throughout our lives and throughout our years of life. And I think it's important to recognize the mainstays like nutrition and sleep and exercise, hydration, the basics. When it comes to sleep, we have to recognize all of the areas that it affects. And when we're paying attention, then we can appreciate what adjustments we need to make. Things like brain health, hormones, immune function, and metabolism even. All of those things, when we start having trouble losing weight, or we start having trouble because we're getting sick more often, I don't know how many of you would agree that sleep isn't necessarily at the top of the list. I think for some of us, we'll recognize that we're tired as well, and we'll start to give in to the need to go to bed a little earlier or sleep a little later. But I think it just is something. I know when I was in my 20s, for sure, I would just power through. And, I can get through it. We'll just make this work. I have too much to do. And just not really looking at what the effects would be on the body. So that's what we're going to start out going over. And then we'll go into some of the strategies. And we'll even talk a little bit about the DNA, because I think that's really helpful. When we think about brain function, if we're having any issues with memory, if we're having any challenges where we feel lethargic and kind of toxic, it could be we're not getting enough sleep. When we're sleeping, we do convert our short-term memories to long-term, and we really need to have proper sleep for our brain to reset and rejuvenate. We do dream, and that is certainly involving the brain, but that's almost like a release and an opportunity for the brain to continue that processing. But it's also really important when we're sleeping that we don't have something activating us, like music or TV in the background. And it's really important because I know a lot of people who tell me that they fall asleep watching TV because it lulls them to sleep. The problem with that is you have no control over what comes on next, what commercials are on, what the content of that is, and how your brain is integrating that into your sleep. It is a distraction. The brain is always looking for risk factors. What could threaten our safety and what could be a challenge for us in terms of our environment. And the brain doesn't decipher, it doesn't distinguish between TV and reality. So we certainly don't want to integrate a lot of the content that's going on late at night into our dreams or into our psyche, where our brain just thinks that that's part of our life and possibly a threat. There's no question that that will reduce our quality of sleep if we're falling asleep to TV or music. Now, if you fall asleep to a timer where you have a quieting gray noise or relaxation music, that's a little bit different because it's not with words, it's not activating your brain. And I do think that that can be helpful, especially if people have trouble falling asleep. But it's really important to go to sleep for a long enough time. 90-minute cycles are typically what our sleep cycles are. The circadian rhythm and the sleep cycles are giving us those 90-minute clips of going into REM sleep and then coming out of that and going back into a deeper sleep. It's lighter and then deeper. And if you have any of the tracking apps that can track your sleep, you'll see how efficient your body is in moving through those cycles. And if you can wake up in a natural cycle and rhythm, that's the best rather than having an alarm. But really paying attention to what those cycles are using those apps can be helpful as well. Our brain also detoxes when we're sleeping. So the glymphatic system is that fluid that goes through the brain and actually clears all of the toxicity and things like that. We would really want to give our brain every benefit of that experience and that process every night. And there is a lot to be said for our position when we're sleeping. So if you prop your head up, some people will lie completely flat and not have a pillow. The value of a pillow is it does give somewhat of an incline, which may not be enough. You want about, I think it's a 5%, don't quote me on that, but I think it's about a 5% incline. So if you have a bed that would allow for you to actually increase an incline and just have that gradual incline, that would be excellent. If not, get a pillow that gives you enough lift, because you want to have that natural flow out of the brain. It's not a circulation that is with a lot of power, it's more with gravity. So you want to make sure that if you're having detox issues, or again, feeling kind of toxic, feeling lethargic, feeling like, especially if you first wake up and you feel like you're really groggy and not feeling great, it may be one of the things you could do just to tweak and see if it makes you feel any better. Hormones at nighttime, it's critical. Our cortisol resets between the hours of 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. when we're sleeping. If we're not sleeping during that time, it doesn't happen. So if we're having any kind of weight issues, if we're having any kind of anxiety or elevation of adrenal issues or elevation of cortisol, we really need to get adequate sleep in an earlier phase of the night. If we can start backing up our sleep by half hour to an hour, usually backing it up a half an hour is doable as far as our brain kind of accepting that change and then continuing to back it up. If you're not going to bed until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you just want to back it up a half an hour each night and do that for a few nights, and then back it up another half hour until you can get yourself, at least if you could get to 11 o'clock, let's say you're a night owl and you really get things done, if you can back it up to start falling asleep at 11 p.m. instead of 1 or 2 a.m., that would be a benefit, because you're at least getting a small, a window of opportunity to have that cortisol reset. And again, it's especially if you're having any kind of anxiety, mood issues, high cortisol, high stress, or if you are having trouble losing weight, especially around your abdomen. Melatonin really helps us with sleep. It's considered the sleep hormone, but it's really important because what we do to prepare ourselves for sleep is what contributes to our melatonin. It's produced by the pineal gland in the brain, and in order for it to be produced, it requires darkness. Not complete darkness, but we want to see a gradual decrease of light as we would in nature. If we see that the sun's setting, we want to give our bodies the benefit of that darkened state for a while before we go to sleep, because that's what's inspiring the melatonin to produce, and that is causing us to feel sleepy and have that deeper, higher quality sleep. We don't want to discount or just simply take melatonin, because our body rhythms are important to contributing to sleep as well. We want to make sure that if you take melatonin, it's not a bad thing. It's actually an antioxidant too. So it's good for you, but you don't necessarily want to replace our production of melatonin because it does a lot for us. 3 milligrams, some people starting at 1 milligram, it's enough to give you that added support for sleep. But you don't want to start out with like 10 or 12 or 15 milligrams, because you don't want to just replace your melatonin. You want to inspire your body to produce melatonin at the right times. And when you take it is important as well, because you want to take it at nighttime, clearly, but you want to take it at a time when you're priming yourself for sleep. Another hormone that's affected is growth hormone. It's so frustrating because teenagers tend to stay awake later just naturally. Their bodies are just more active and they're wanting to do more and sadly be on their phones all the time. And when it comes to growth, you are definitely impairing your growth process if you're not getting enough sleep. So we want to make sure that you're getting 8 or 9 hours for the growth hormones to really be optimized. And it's not just for growing, it's also for muscle development. And it's just so important that we pay attention to all of the factors that go into what is going to make us successful in our health goals. If you're looking to develop lean muscle, you're working on continuing to grow and develop and have the best energy level and the best performance, you have to get enough sleep. It's absolutely critical. Even things like leptin and ghrelin and insulin and thyroid hormones are affected by sleep. When we look at all of those hormones are contributing to our weight, our ability to be satisfied by food. If we don't have the right amount of sleep, and then we don't have the production of those hormones adequately, we will have more hunger. We will be likely to eat foods that we wouldn't be tempted to eat otherwise, and it is going to affect our weight. And of course, if we have a lowered insulin sensitivity, then that's going to be an added issue. When it comes to immune function, if we don't get adequate sleep, we can't protect ourselves from the viruses and the bacteria that we encounter. There were studies done that showed we have a 50% reduction, even if we reduce our sleep just for 2 nights in a row, and we have inadequate sleep and recovery from our days. That is enough to reduce our antibody protection by, I think that said 50%. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to have our health goals compromised simply because we won't go to bed or because we don't go to bed at a decent time. It also upsets the balance of immune response, which long-term can contribute to a risk of infection and chronic disease. It's amazing how sleep is one of the last things that we consider when it comes to our health and when it comes to our immune function and fighting chronic disease. We have to get enough sleep. The other thing that's really interesting is when we don't get enough sleep, it can alter the DNA structure of our immune stem cells. That can affect our inflammatory response. And if we have high inflammation, I don't know if you've heard recently, but there's a lot of research out there that connects our level of inflammation to our risk of chronic disease. So we don't want to have systemic inflammation promoted by lack of sleep and then ultimately be more susceptible to chronic diseases. Metabolism is another thing that is affected by lack of sleep. If we have reduced sleep time, it's been linked, as I mentioned, to insulin sensitivity. So it's reducing our sensitivity to insulin, and it's impairing our nutrient metabolism and can increase hunger and weight gain. So we want to make sure that we're giving our bodies every advantage of maintaining our ideal weight. It doesn't mean that we're healthy if we're at a good weight. There can be many people who look thin and fit, and if they don't work out and they don't eat healthy, that's going to catch up with them. But if you add in lack of sleep as well, or they don't go to bed until really late, that can just be the tipping point. So I really think we need to be cognizant of all the different factors, and we will get to some strategies here in a few minutes. So when we look at the genes, I know not everyone has done a genetic test, and that's totally fine, but I just want people to have a sense of what you can learn from your genes, and then you can decide whether it's worth doing or not. For each person, it is different, and when it comes to your sleep, you can learn a lot about your ability to sleep and what you could leverage to support your sleep. Things like circadian rhythm, your clock gene, CLOCK, is really helpful in understanding our circadian rhythm. Because if you are working swing shift and you're imposing those changes on your body all the time, you can end up impairing your health at a much greater level than someone else who has different genes. So knowing your circadian rhythm genes, knowing your sleep-wake cycle genes, which are the CRY genes and PER genes, there are multiple of each. There are 2 primary CRY genes, and there are 3 primary PER genes that are related to the sleep-wake cycle and what is ideal for you. So looking at that is helpful when it comes to a longer sleep cycle or a shorter sleep cycle. You may hear people say that they only have to sleep 4 or 5 hours and then they feel like they have adequate sleep and they feel fine. Well, if someone has trained themselves, like my dad did in law school, he trained himself to only sleep 4 hours because he studied and worked and went to school. But I question that because when I look at my genes, I don't know what his were, but obviously I'm a reflection of him. And when I look at my genes and my kids' genes, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing that short sleep cycle as an advantage. I think this is totally a hypothesis, but I think he trained himself to sleep in a shorter time frame, and he died at age 53, which is clearly not ideal. If that made him more susceptible to chronic disease, that's not worth it at all. When you look at your genes and you're able to appreciate whether a longer sleep duration or a shorter sleep cycle is more supportive for your body and for your health, then you know, and you can act accordingly. There are many, many genes involved, but I just highlighted a few. There's one more gene that I thought was interesting because it's alertness at night. DEC2 helps us overcome that tiredness. And I don't know if you have ever experienced this, but like I tend to get a second wind after a certain time. So I might start to feel like I could go to sleep and I'll fight through it, sadly. note to self and everyone else, let's not do that. Let's make sure that we do what is best for our bodies and best for our health goals. Everyone has different health goals too, so I appreciate that I'm only using myself as an example and my dad as an example. Yeah, everybody's different. So what do we do if sleep or energy are issues for us? The first thing I would say is observe. You want to observe, what is the status of my sleep? What is it that I'm dealing with right now in terms of my symptoms? Do I have tiredness in the morning? Do I feel like I'm falling off in the afternoon? Do I feel like there are mood issues, focus issues, any kind of irritable feelings, anything like that? When we start to recognize what our current status is and whether sleep could be playing a part or not, that's the first step, is just get a grip on what is the current situation for us. The second would be then to look at sleep and what your sleep habits are. So what time are you going to sleep? How much sleep are you typically getting? Are you going to bed and getting up about the same time every day, including weekends? Because that can be really helpful. That can be a training mechanism for your body, but it's also a rhythm for your body and giving yourself the consistency that we often need. And really looking at our sleep habits. Then we have to look at how are we leading up to sleep, because as I mentioned about melatonin, melatonin is actually produced as a result of the darkness that we're imposing on our system as we're leading into sleep. Well, the problem is we have lights, we have computers, we have TVs, we have all of the different influences of light that we could possibly have, and we don't necessarily accommodate our pineal gland in that development of melatonin. We need to be aware of that and start working with our bodies. So like 3 to 4 hours before we go to bed, it's ideal to tone down the lights, avoid computers and TVs, which I know is not going to happen for most people, even myself. And so I recognize that as a serious limitation, and I got blue blocking glasses. When you wear the glasses at night, like let's say you don't need to wear glasses normally, just get some blue blocking glasses that you can wear the last half of the evening. And when you're on your computer or watching TV, wear those, dim the lights in the room so that you're minimizing the influence and you're allowing for the production of melatonin to start to really kick in. Also, when we're eating and drinking caffeine no later than 2 p.m. if you do drink caffeine. Really back that up. Pay attention to when you're drinking caffeine. Pay attention to when you're eating. You want to make sure you don't eat close to bedtime. You want to eat, probably give yourself a 4-hour window before you go to bed that you're not eating. And then not drinking a ton of water. When we are being really mindful of what we're doing leading up to sleep, we start to see our patterns and what habits we have that might be fighting our sleep. And if we're starting to have issues, what has changed? Or if things, wow, I had the best night's sleep I could possibly have had the other night, what did I do differently? And how did I lead up to sleep? What did I do? Working out is fantastic, but you don't necessarily want to work out right before bedtime. If you do, like I'll do yoga or something like that right before I go to bed or within a couple hours of going to bed, but you don't necessarily want to do a really heavy workout before you go to bed because that's very activating. If you do have issues with your mind racing when you lie down, there are some really good techniques, both mindful techniques, and also there are some really good natural things that you can do and that you can take to help calm your brain. There are homeopathic remedies, there are some really good flower essences which are very effective. I've actually seen those work well for even pets. They can't fake it, so they have to work, right? But when you start to look at what we are doing and what are the influences, even the electromagnetic that we have in our homes. If we can have our internet and all of our Wi-Fi connections on a timer and have that shut down at a certain time so that we don't have as much electromagnetic influence while we're sleeping, that can be really helpful also. Because think about it, I know these are details that some people think they're just minor, but if it's affecting our brain function, our cognitive health, our hormones, our immune function, and our metabolism, all of these add up to huge value if we're willing to make those changes. Observe what your current status is, what your sleep looks like, what your symptoms are. Investigate the contributors and start looking at things like nutrition and habits and lifestyle and your activity level, and then adjust to address the root cause. Start tracking. I have some tracking sheets. If anybody wants them, just comment below, tracking sheet, and I'll send you a tracking sheet. You can track your sleep, you can track your symptoms, you can track your nutrition. I have one for symptoms and for nutrition. And overall, these are things that we can benefit from really quickly. Like within a week or so, you'll start to notice a difference. Some people start to notice a difference in their sleep right away when they make those minor adjustments to their lifestyle and their habits. So I hope that this was helpful. If anybody has questions about sleep or the genes that I mentioned, or if you are having any challenges that you just want to step through, you're welcome to message me and we can schedule a call or just chat in the messages. And hopefully you'll have great sleep tonight. Thanks so much for joining me to learn about DNA Health. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. If you'd like to join my free community where we delve into more details about DNA, just click Community below.